He running around here rocking through the house, and his wife beat her with spaghetti stains all on him. Dawiyad well, you guys can let me know once we're up and running, I guess.
Yeah, we're close. We're just it's just transferring over or downloading over.
Yeah, no. I guess it'll pop up in the screen too. Where's my magnifying glass?
Yeah, it'll pop up. You'll see.
Oh yeah, I see it now. It says live YouTube.
It hasn't been live yet on ours yet. We're seeing a white screen. Oh, it is on. It is on.
Okay.
Oh, 1 second, sir. We're good. We're good. I just want to expand out. All right.
Okay, so we're good. Now, look, what happened is, brothers that's in your house with, y'all have to mute your microphones.
Yeah.
Okay. So we were just hitting up a quick verse real quick before we dive into the class. I was just showing the brothers the Most High, not Dawi, I say Ma'awala and you brothers in the school, you guys gonna do the reading this evening because Amayetazar's got some things to deal with. We were just talking about the creation, not the creation, but man's purpose and woman's purpose. So we had read Wisdom of Solomon chapter 2 and verse 23. And so read that again, Mawala. Wisdom of Solomon chapter 2 and verse 23. We read Wisdom of Solomon chapter 2 and verse 23. We were just in the process of reading afterward, Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26. And then after that, I was going to take you to I think it's Exodus chapter 19 and verses 1 through 6. And and then once we get that out the way, then we're going to dive into the topic for this evening. And the topic for this, well, we'll deal with that when we get there. So go ahead, read that, Mawala. Call it out again and read it.
Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 23 reads, "For the Most High created man to be immortal and made him to be an image of his own eternity."
So the scriptures tell you, and when it says man, it ain't talking about mankind. It's talking about, when it says man, it's referring to Adam. And it's referring to Adam and the nation and the descendants that he would beget. So the Most High's intention was that he had a representation of himself on this earth, so that all the other peoples would be raised up and brought up in the right way. I'm going to show you that. So go from there to what you just read again, Genesis 1:26.
God. Genesis 1 and 26. And the Most High said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea."
Another question before we get started. Are they recording?
God, it's live.
Okay, cool. Oh, that's right. I forgot a whole different thing. So if it's live, then it ends up getting stored, huh?
God.
Okay. Let us make man in our image. We're not breaking down Genesis. I'm just, like I said, rapping to the brothers before we get started. The image, when the Most High said, "Let us," it's the Most High talking to Christ. And through Hebrews chapter 1, through Colossians chapter 1, through Hebrews chapter 3, you find out that the Most High created Christ, and the Most High had Christ create everything else. So when he said, "Let us make man," he's looking at everything else that was done. And at this point, all other species of animals and all other people were made. The people is in with the beasts of the field and the cattle and all of that. Like I said, when we break Genesis 1 down, I'll show you all that. But then he saved that 6th day to make the one who he would put in charge of the world, and that he would also make a representation of himself. And that's what we just read in chapter 2, verse 23 of Wisdom of Solomon. So our purpose now, that just shows you what? Read verse 1 again and read the whole verse. Oh, I guess it's going to be 20, 26 and 27 where it tells you that he was given dominion, right?
It goes on, I think it goes a little bit past that. It's,
Okay, go ahead.
28.
Go ahead.
Come. Genesis 1 and 26. And the Most High said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So the Most High created man in his own image. In the image of the Most High created he him. Male and female created he them.
So he's telling you, man, the Most High made Adam and put him on top. Now, and there was a whole bunch of other people, but he raised up Eve. Here's the point. We were dealing with purpose and what the Most High is doing with us. Before I get started, Kwame, is that a turban that you rocking, man? Is that a Montezampa or a turban that you got on?
God.
Okay, good. I didn't know if the brother, I was been thinking about it like for the last month. I didn't know if the brothers or the sisters was making them because I was gonna have a war. Send me a couple of them, man.
I make them.
Oh, you made it?
God. I make
Oh,
them.
that's tight. But one of these days when we get off camera, I'm gonna have to check it out to see how you made it so I can know if that's the type that I need.
This right here is it's wrapped like one, but it's more like a scarf. But I do make them. Like I make.
Okay, you know how to make the Montezampas, the turbans.
God.
We'll talk, brother. Okay, that's cool, man. Yeah, I was like, that looked like the old days, how we used to roll them. Anyway, let's get back on track. But it looks good. So now go from there. So what I'm showing you is that the Most High made Adam, and Adam was put here with a responsibility that he didn't keep, that he didn't perform. And so that's why the Most High punished us. The Most High destroyed the world with a flood. I'm just speeding through time, and began to start again with a continuance of this same project. So go from now. What was the project? Now what did he do? He raised up Abraham, and he promised Abraham, made promises in the covenant with Abraham, extended those promises and covenants to Isaac, extended those promises and covenants to Jacob, and then from Jacob to all of us, all of the descendants of the 12 patriarchs, right? Now, what was his intention? He got right back to where he left off. So there you're going to go to chapter 19 of Exodus. And we're going to read verses 1 through 6. Then we'll talk about this woman. Then we'll get on track for our topic.
Slakia. What was that in Exodus?
Exodus chapter 19, and I believe it's verses 1 through 6. Let me get there.
God.
Yes, go ahead and read that.
Exodus chapter 19, verse 1. In the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. For they were departed from Rephidim, and were come to the desert of Sinai, and had pitched in the wilderness. And there Israel camped before the mount. And Moses went up unto the Most High. And the Most High called unto him out of the mountain, saying, thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, you have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure upon me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel.
So that's what was the intention. The Most High punished us for what we did before the flood, brought us back out, and said, now, I'm going to make of you a priest, a nation of priests. Now, why would we be a kingdom of priests? Because this kingdom was intended to be the kingdom that the Most High used to teach all the other nations. So this is, now all of that is me going in the briefest form to show you what our purpose is. talking about the man. There's a purpose that the Most High has for us, and we were created to be a nation of teachers. I'm gonna make it in layman's terms. We were created to be the nation that the Most High used to teach the other nations about him. And in order to be able to fully grasp the nature of the power that we would be teaching these nations, the Most High made us to be like him so that they could understand that, because here's the question. The question for the other nations is, why should we follow your God? You understand? So the Most High answered that question with what he did to Egypt. That's why. Because I'll F you up. That's why, you know what I mean? That's what it comes down to it. And then we ended up in the same mentality. Well, why should we follow the Most High? And we started following the idols of the other nations. Now, let me bring it on home. Go to the book of Joshua, the last chapter of Joshua. And let me just let me make sure I'm in the last chapter. Is that what? That's 24 chapters, right? Yeah. Okay. Now you're going to start off. It's 2 sections, but let me see. I want you to read verse 1 and 2 first, all right? No, you're going to read actually verse. He's telling us our history, but I want to pull some points out because I made a statement. I said that we were punished. The Most High destroyed the world with a flood, brought Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the 12 fathers, and then we were born in Egypt. And that was a punishment for us for what we had did before the flood. And so now the Most High that brought us out of Egypt. He just told us in chapter 19, I mean for you to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. The whole purpose of having a whole kingdom is to be able to have enough people to teach the rest of the nations. Just like we had a nation, but the Most High only used one tribe so that he could use them to teach the rest of us. Well, he was going to in turn use us to teach the nation of Israel to teach the rest of the people of the world. Now, so read verses 1 and 2, whoever's going to read. Joshua chapter 24, verses 1 and 2. I know, I'm saying I'm starting here first. Go ahead.
Joshua chapter 24, verse 1. And Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and called for the elders of Israel and for their heads and for their judges and for their officers. And they presented themselves before the Most High. And Joshua said unto all the people, thus saith the Lord, power of Israel, your fathers dwelt on the other side of the flood in old time, even Terah, the father of Abraham, and the father of Nahor, and they serve other gods.
So that's proof. Abraham's father was an idolater. People don't know that. So, but he's saying on the other side of the flood is not talking about Abraham's father, Terah. The other side of the flood is talking about all of the descendants from Adam to Noah and all of those children. We went into idolatry. And so the Most High brought us back, brought us out of Egypt, and he's clearly starting all over with us. And that's why he said, now your father served other gods on the other side of the flood, and your fathers, and Terah, Abraham's father. That's why the Most High in chapter 12 of Genesis told Abraham, leave thy father's house. So this is what Adam did. In other words, we was created to be priests of the Most High. Let me just drink this real quick. When you read the scriptures, man, not even the scriptures, when you read Josephus, Josephus tells you that Adam was given a government, and the government was always passed down to a select person from the next generation. So when Cain killed Abel, Abel was going to be the judge that succeeded Adam, but Cain killed him. So the government was passed down. Cain was banished, and the government of the world was passed down to Seth. And the last governor of the world that came out of the seed of Adam was Noah. And then the Most High started all over again. It took a couple of thousands of years before man was populated enough, and he finally got to what? To Abraham. So now he done punished us, brought us out of Egypt, and said what? And said, now, you know what I did. You see how I delivered you. And you know how you guys all served gods on the other side of the flood, and Abraham's father. So he's telling us it was in the ancient times and recent times, recent being him talking to Israel right there through Joshua. Now jump down from there and go. No. Read verse 3. Let's read this. This is cold.
Verse 3. And I took your father Abraham from the other side of the flood.
So the Most High links Abraham to Adam. Abraham was the survivor. Noah was the survivor, his family, of the Adamites. And the Most High killed all those other people. They would remember the record, all of mankind, with the exception of Adam, that's mentioned in Genesis 1:26, they were created on the 5th day. The Most High took his chosen people and created them on the 6th day, and put them over all the other creatures and over all the people. And then we mingled with the people. This is why it says in Genesis chapter 6, when it says the sons of God, meaning Adam, saw the daughters of men, and they were fair to them. We started mingling with the women and then following those strange gods. That's what this is telling us. So the Lord has given us the trajectory of how he started over. So I took Abraham from the other side of the flood. Go ahead.
And led him throughout all the land of Canaan, and multiplied his seed, and gave him Isaac. And I gave unto Isaac Jacob and Esau. And I gave unto Esau Mount Seir to possess it. But Jacob and his children went down into Egypt.
So that's the whole history right there. We ain't gonna read the whole chapter. Now jump down to verse 14. You go ahead.
Verse 14. Now therefore fear the Lord, and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord.
See that? So we were still on the other side of the flood, and as recent as Egypt. Because we were in Egypt, like we're in spiritual Egypt now, doing the Christian thing, doing the Catholic thing, doing the Muslim thing. Those are the gods of this Egypt. But they just called them religions and beliefs. But that's what it was back then. It was beliefs. Niggas believed that wood could talk to you, but the wood couldn't talk. Go ahead.
And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
So finishing it up on this little brief topic. So that's why I go down that long line, just to show you we had a purpose. The Most High didn't just make man and then say, okay, now I'm gonna make a woman for him to serve him. The Most High made us to serve him first. Then he said, okay, it's not good that the man should dwell alone. I will make a help meet, meaning a help sufficient, or a help that's proper, or a help that is appropriate for him. And that's her purpose. So Esau, in these times, have conditioned us away from our purpose. And in being conditioned away from our purpose, we've been trained to be out of spirit, or out of character, or out of our nature. And that's why men be all crying when their women leave. I ain't talking about y'all, brothers. I'm just saying the world that we come from. cats out there committing suicide. I remember the first person I heard about that I understood what was taking place. I was young. It was this, I don't know if Freddie Prinze was his, well, I don't know if he was Puerto Rican, I think, or if he was Mexican, but he's a comedian that played on, it was like the Spanish equivalent of Sanford and Son, right? It was called Chico and the Man. I don't know if y'all remember Chico and the Man. Yeah, man, they had Jose Feliciano doing the what you call it, the theme to the, it was a cold movie, man. It was a cold sitcom show.
Yeah.
And then his son is an actor now, Freddie Prinze Jr. But his woman took his son, and this dude blew his brains out. I was like, damn. But I was saying, and this is a man from what he was doing. He was from the hood. He one of them cats like Eddie Murphy, man. Go out or Michael Collier. Go out in public and tell jokes and get popular to where people they know that you're gonna be there that day every day of the week. You know what I mean? And got a following. So he ended up going live, prime time, brother. But and any of the women that he could have had, and he killed himself. Now, why do I say that? Because that's what this system did to us. It made us weak. It made us soft. And I don't mean soft in the sense of compassionate. I'm talking about it made us not manly. It made us feminine and childish and beastly. And so the Most High is taking us out, and all the people that are in our lives when we come to the truth, they'd be lucky if one of them make it with us. The Most High strip us of all that we know and all of what we have so that he can do what we just got through reading. So he could make another attempt at creating us in his own image. That's what he's doing, Oxel. So that was said, let the process do what it's supposed to do. It ain't supposed to make you hateful. It's supposed to make you manly, wise, and it's supposed to harden you into your mission. It's supposed to what? To galvanize you. That's what the word heart is supposed to galvanize you into your purpose. And nothing or no one is supposed to be able to pull you away from that. Now, so what we're going to deal with tonight, we went, whoever's reading, go to Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25. Last week we finished breaking up. 2 or 3 weeks ago, we started off doing Daniel. We started off on our apocalyptic blitz. And so we started with Daniel chapter 2, and we moved on to Daniel chapter 7. And so we finished Daniel chapter 7 last week, but Daniel chapter 7 has verse 25. And verse 25 is not something that you can break down and then keep on moving. Oh, now let's go to Daniel. Go to verse 26. We did that, but I also stated that what? I also stated that we would come back and do our own little expose on this verse, because this is going to take us into some other things. Not other things, but it's going to take us into some extended research, right? That might appear non-related. Got all this. Wet this stuff up here. That might appear non-related, but it is. And you'll see how in the damn, what the hell did I do? And you'll see how it resolves into the whole apocalyptic blitz series. So go ahead and read verse, Go ahead and read verse 25. Somebody, yeah, you read for me, please.
I'll read.
But if you can, you're gonna have to go ahead and read. Let me see how the volume is. You good? Let me see how it is.
I'll get closer.
It's better because man, we got people listening in on the internet.
I got you. Hey, last week, bro, I know we had to do that Zoom. We couldn't record on the YouTube.
I remember. Oh yeah, because we were doing it from Ward's house, right?
My phone was tripping, bro, so I couldn't hear the voice, the speech. I got to the house, took me like an hour to get to the house. It's only called an hour of the class, but it was.
Okay. And it's not even recorded. Huh?
I asked for the notes, and no, I couldn't get the notes. I'm like, come on, man.
Nobody took notes.
But I asked the sisters out. Maybe I can get it from the sisters. Maybe I can get it from the sisters. I've asked them again. I asked again. But it was cold.
Find out, man.
Whatever you want.
But let me say this. Let me ask you this. Have you ever gotten Daniel chapter 7 before?
Just the first part, bro. Not like all. You know, I got it long back in the day.
Let me say this. The most demanding aspect of Daniel chapter 7 is what we're getting ready to go into right now. The rest of it breaks itself down. Verse 25 is the one that requires that we go and do this extensive study so that we can know what's really being said. But when you, let me just summarize it, man, real quick. And it's good to do a brief summary. Chapter 7, verse, one of the verses, verse 4, where, or I guess it's verse 5, where it talks about, first of all, it's talking about the final four empires. And all of these empires are on the foundation of a specific ethnic group, but people don't get. So the Babylonians is the first beast, represented by a lion with eagle's wings, and that person who ushered them into the quote empire status was Nebuchadnezzar. That's what that's talking about. Their kingdom began since then, and this is recording or this is streaming, so you'll be able to go back and get the stuff. I'm gonna go through it fast, but you'll be able to just push pause and write the stuff down once this is available.
Sure.
So 586 BC, we use that date because that's the specific year that the Babylonians came and took down Israel. You understand? Before that date, Nebuchadnezzar had already exiled important figures in our civilization, like Daniel and the three holy children, and of course many others. The scriptures tell you that there was a couple of years before where many of us got exiled. So that's the Babylonians. It says the second beast was a bear that raised itself up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth. That turned out to be the kingdom that took down the Babylonians, which was the Persian Empire under Cyrus. And the 3 ribs, that took place about 536 BC. The 3 ribs in the mouth of that bear were the 3 kingdoms that could have challenged the Persians. They were actually fighting over who would be the successor, what kingdom would succeed the Babylonians. And so the Lydians were taking a shot at it, and the Egyptians wanted another go at being the regional power, and the Persians, that was them. So the third one was the Babylonian, the standing Babylonian Empire. Those were the 3 ribs. Those were the 3 elements that the Persian had to conquer to become the preeminent nation. So they took one of the ribs was the very Babylonian Empire, and then the other were the 2 kingdoms that were contending for the next, to be the next preeminent. And that was the kingdom of Lydia and the kingdom of Egypt. Bang. It says after that, it was what? A leopard that had 4 heads and 4 wings. So the leopard represented Alexander the Great, that he had a long campaign, but his final battles were fought between the years against the final Persian king was Darius. And so Alexander fought him, and out of all the battles, the 3 major decisive battles were fought between 333 BC and 331 BC. And so 331 BC, playing Alexander's running the whole show. He rules for 12 years, and then his kingdom is divided. The scriptures say 4 heads because it's giving us the final result. But for the sake of history, there were 5 generals that Alexander split his kingdom up into: Lysimachus, Cassander, Antigonus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. But why do the scriptures say 4? Because once Alexander died, the kings began to fight. And so Lysimachus, Cassander, and Seleucus, those 3 came up against Antigonus, who had the greatest kingdom out of all the successors of Alexander. And his kingdom was that which mostly resembled what Alexander's vision was. So Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus went to battle against him. The battle is called, that period is called the Diadochi. And at the final battle between those 3, between those 4, Seleucus, Lysimachus, and Cassander, all of those 3 versus Antigonus, in the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC, they defeated him, and they departed his kingdom, or they divided his kingdom. They parted his kingdom, his territory among the 3. And so it went from being 5 kingdoms to 4. And that's where the prophecy picks it up at. So the four heads represent Seleucus, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassander. and the four wings are each of their respective territories. All right. And then in verse 7, it said that there was a terrible beast. It didn't tell you what it was. It just said that it was terrible. It had iron teeth, and it stamped the residue of the kingdom of the beast with the feet of it. In other words, it was talking about the Romans. We had to go from there to 2nd Ezra chapter 11. We read verses 1 through 3 to find out that that fourth beast was an eagle. We read chapter 11, verses 1, 2, and 3. Then we jumped down to verse 20 to verse 36, all the way to 42 or 43 to find out that that was an eagle and that that eagle was the fourth beast. All right. Then we went from there to 2nd Ezra chapter 12, and it brought it on home. Verses 10 through 12, it said that eagle, the eagle which thou sawest, Esdras, is the kingdom that was shown in a vision of thy brother Daniel, but it was not expounded unto him. Meaning I didn't go into detail with Daniel, but now I expounded unto you. So in other words, we find out that the fourth beast was the Roman Empire, and that the animal that represented them was the eagle. Bland. Then the rest of the chapter, it talks about what? You moving on to verse 8, it tells you that that fourth beast had 10 horns. It tells us that it was different, diverse from all the other beasts. What did we do to find out how it was diverse? We went and read 1 Maccabees chapter 8, verses 1 through 16. And 1 Maccabees chapter 8, verses 1 through 16 told us about the fourth beast, which was the Romans, whose emblem was the eagle, that they were exercising all of the very same conquest and imperial activity that the nations before them had exercised, but they differed in their form of government, and that they were governed by a senate, a body of elders that called themselves the senate, and of that body of elders, they chose a leader, one person to govern them every year. That person was called a consul when you check out history. Now, that's verse 8, and at the end of verse 8, it said, and it had 10 horns. And the 10 horns was the 10 provinces of the Roman Empire in the ancient days. And we mentioned them like Spain, which is Portugal and Spain today. We mentioned the province of Gaul, which is France, Switzerland, Belgium, certain parts of Holland. That was, we mentioned the Danube. The Danube was Italy, Romania, Austria, Hungary, right? Central Europe for the most part. In other words, those were the 10 horns, territories. So then it went on to break down the Ancient of Days coming, right? Christ coming. So we fast forward to verse 17, and it breaks it down. It says, these four kings, these great beasts which are four kings that shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom. Then he goes down and he's breaking it down. It tells you of the 10 horns, I missed this back in verse 8, that of the 10 horns, there would be another little horn that would what? That would rise. And It said, before whom 3 of the original horns would fall or were plucked up. And then we went and showed that was talking about during the transcourse of time of the Roman Empire, Rome experienced a height, and then it began to go through a decline, and ultimately it suffered a fall. And so during that fall, the Moors, right, the Carolingian dynasty, all these, we didn't go into the whole blackness of it, and we just basically was talking about what ended up becoming the period from 476 to 1492. That dynamic, that kingdom, that empire was suppressed and put down. And but in their renaissance, meaning in recuperating, in those Edomite families recuperating their territories, expelling out hundreds of thousands of declared Jews, expelling out the Muslims, finally the Moors, and finally recapturing the last military holdout, which was Granada, which belonged to Spain. They ended up regaining all of Europe. But the difference was that whereas during the height of the Roman Empire, all of those horns were unified provinces that fought under one banner. As a result of the Renaissance, all of those European territories became independent kingdoms. So what was once the Roman province of Gaul became the independent kingdom of France, the independent kingdom of Switzerland and Belgium and Holland. What was once the Roman province of Hispania became the independent kingdoms of Spain and Portugal, and so on and so forth, right? The Danube, that region, they sprung up into independent kingdoms that we know today as Germany and Austria and Hungary, right? Yeah, that's it, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy itself. So of those new kingdoms, Europe began to expand once again outside of its borders, but this time concentrating toward the west. And so in doing so, the Spanish were the first to make it, then the Portuguese would follow, and then the Brits, the British, the French, they were, and the Dutch. And so in doing so, those kingdoms that were 10 horns ended up becoming colonial empires.
Huh.
And so the British would come and plant their colonies. And so that was a horn, the Brits. The French would come and acquire territories. That was another one of the 10 horns. And the Spanish, who had acquired their territories, those were 3 horns. But that little horn that came up is talking about the kingdom that emerged out of the British Empire, the colonies. They came against their crown, threw the yoke of their crown off, and became the United States of America. That was the first original horn plucked up. Then they moved on to acquire the territory from France, the Louisiana Purchase territory. Purchased that for gold. Napoleon was hard up for money during his final wars in Europe. And then in a series of wars called the Spanish-American Wars, the United States acquired what was once Spain's colonial territories. And so that was how that new horn, that little horn, the 13 colonies threw Britain out, plucked up Britain, threw Britain out, purchased Spain, purchased France out, bought France out, and then once again threw Spain out. And that's how the United States acquired Puerto Rico. That's how they acquired the Philippines. That's how they acquired Cuba. That's how they acquired Guam. All right. So that's what it's talking. In other words, that verse 8 in that phrase talked about, prophesied about the birth of the United States. And that's what all that's about. So then when you get to verse 17, it reiterates all of that again, what I just said. And it finally gets to let's read verse, where does it say? Is it verse 24 or verse 23 where it says, thus the fourth kingdom? Who's reading that you're reading, Dawi? I find that.
And the 23, and thus said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth.
So this is talking about the Roman Empire. Go ahead.
And shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise.
See, now what, so that you can help understand, that's why I said that shall arise, because they had to go through the whole process of Rome going from being the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire, to going through a decline, to experiencing a fall, and then to going and then coming back and experiencing a rebirth. In their rebirth, those 10 kings would be, those are the what? Those are what you call the post-Renaissance colonial empires. And of those post-Renaissance colonial empires, 3 of them shared a territory that would be called later on the United States. But some colonies from one of them had to throw its own father off, then go and acquire the territories of the other 2. That's what you're getting ready to read now. Go ahead.
It says, devour the whole earth and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings.
So that's the United States acquiring the territories. One territory was acquired through purchase, and the other 2 was acquired through series of wars. Britain was thrown out in the wars called what? The War of Independence of 1776, and then later on the War of 1812, which lasted from 1812 to 1814, right? And then the Spanish would their territories over a period of time through the Spanish-American Wars, and then they would end up what? That's how the United States ended up going, what they say, from sea to shining sea. So that was the United States that threw out England, Spain, and France. Continue.
And he shall speak great words against the Most High.
So that's talking about out of all of the European kingdoms, the United States has been the most anti-God kingdom. And this is wild because they're the ones that think that what? They always say this kingdom shall speak words against the Most High because but they think that they're pro-Christian. They really believe that this Constitution is biblically inspired, and it's not. Then why aren't the laws being taught? Why aren't the law? If it's biblically inspired, why isn't your government in any way resemblant of that which is biblical? But the point is, this is them in their position as being the greatest nation on the face of the earth. And they, everything, God bless America and God we trust. Go ahead, Amayetazar. Dawiyat is in such a habit of saying Amayetazar. Go ahead.
As that great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints.
So this is the saints. It's talking about us, the Israelites, from both kingdoms, being worn out by this dude. Go ahead.
And think to change times and laws.
And so the laws have been changed, meaning he's not following the Heavenly Father's laws, and the times. This is the culture that whose calendar we're on. We're not on biblical calendar or culture. Go ahead.
And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time.
Now that's what we're going to stick with tonight. And we're going to be there for as long as it takes tonight, next Friday, whatever, because we got a whole lot of reading. So the time, let me just say this, now that we're being recorded and everything, the time singular, time plural, and dividing of a time, which is the half of a time, is talking about a period of 350 years. Now, people will say, how do you arbitrarily get that 350? They think it's arbitrarily, but it's not. This is working from off of the premise of a previous announced prophecy. And I've had people say, okay, I can see the time maybe being 100 years. But when it says times, plural, how do you know that ain't 300 more years? Because we say the time is 100 years, the times is 200 years, and the dividing of a time is 50 years. And so I guess they call themselves being gracious with me, right? Playing devil's advocate, but they'll say, okay, so I can see, let's say for the sake of argument, the time really does mean 100 years. How do you, and let's say the dividing of a time is crystal, it could be accepted that it's 50 years. But how do you know the times is 200 years and not an additional, or not 300, or not 400? It just says times. And they think that these are random numbers that we're coming up with off the top of our head. But all of this that we're reading, I'm going to show you now, is based upon the first prophecy about our deliverance that the Most High made. And so from here, we're going to go to, we're going to follow a trajectory of arguments that people, that people present against the breakdown. So I'm going to show you how to handle the arguments against the breakdown. So the first argument is, we'll prove that that's talking about 350 years, the time, the dividing of the time. So let's go to Genesis chapter 15. And you're going to read verse 13 and 14. Go ahead.
Chapter 15, verse 13 and 14.
Genesis 15, verse 13. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance.
Okay, hold on. Hey, Daviya, do you want to bring one of them desks over there like that so you can sit with your stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll bring it. I'll try.
yeah, just bring that one. You stay with y'all, Hector.
It's all good.
That way you can still have your stuff, you know. Okay, read that again. Read that again, brother. Kwam.
God. Genesis 15 and 13. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance.
Okay, so here we go. Now, all of this is with the intention of breaking down what it is when it says that that little horn in Daniel chapter 7, verse 25, that he would wear out the saints, he would change the laws, change time, and that we would be in his hand for a time, times, and the dividing of a time. The purpose is to break that down. So what are we doing with Genesis chapter 25? The Most High is already prophesying about this kingdom. People think, let me just explain it. We're going to read it. This is the Most High prophesying about the overthrow and the destruction and the judgment of the European civilization, but spearheaded, right, by the United States. And I'm going to show you that. So 400 years. Now, when it said afterward, will I judge that nation whom they serve? People think that that judgment or that this already happened with Egypt. And that's not the case. This is not talking about what resulted in Moses leading the children or our forefathers of Israel out of the land of Egypt. This is not prophesying that. Now, that means we got to take another step. So the first 400, we want to prove the 300, the time times and the dividing of a time is 350. So we're showing you right now, we're working with a period initially introduced of 400 years. Now we got to prove that the 400 years that we're reading about now did not already happen, that this did not culminate with Moses leading us out. And so that means we got to read that. So let's do this. The next step is going to be to go to Exodus chapter 12. Exodus chapter 12, verses 40 and 41.
Exodus chapter 12, verses 40 and 41. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the self same day, it came to pass that all the hosts of the Most High went out from the land of Egypt.
So that means this is talking about now we just read in Genesis that it would be 400 years. So when you read here 430, these are the things. It'll say we was afflicted. I'm going to tell you, these are the arguments that I hear. That we were afflicted in Egypt for 400 years. And when I asked, well, then why does it say 430? The brothers say the 30 years was the time that Joseph was in there before us. And they got everything completely wrong. Now we're going to read it. So here's the question. And I'm asking this question with an intention of seeing if anyone knows the scripture. You might have, because I taught this topic. I taught this concept. I shared this concept already a couple of years ago, maybe not that long ago, but not in this context. So when did it says we left Egypt after 430 years on the self same day. So the question is, we know that after 430 years, Israel left Egypt. But the question is, what was the moment that the 430-year period or that count, what was the moment that count began? Who knows that? At what moment? Because it said the self same day. I'm going to read that myself, right? It says verse 41, and it came to pass at the end of 430 years, even the self same day, it came to pass that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. So the question is, if it happened the same, if we left out of Egypt 430 years to the day, what was the day where the count began? Does anyone know that? Anybody got any ideas? Okay, then let's go read it. We're going to have to go where? We're going to have to go to Galatians. Galatians chapter 3 and verse 16 and 17 is going, you won't find an explanation in the Old Testament of when the count began, although the count began in the Old Testament. Galatians chapter 3, verse 16 and 17 tells us at what moment in the Old Testament the count began that would result in 430 years. So go ahead and read that. Galatians chapter 3, verses 16 and 17. And we got to be meticulous with this because this goes past, it goes over a lot of people's heads. When I say that, meaning it's not that it's not difficult and it's not what people like to call deep. It's just we don't be making the connection of what's being shared. So read that.
Galatians chapter 3, verse 16. Now to Abraham and his seed was the promise made. He saith not, and to seeds, as of many, but as of one, and thy seed, which is Christ.
Now stop right there, because he's giving us history, right? Let me get there. Now to Abram and his seed were the promises made. He said not, and to seeds, this is plural, as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Christ. So now what is he referring to? This is stuff that you guys are you can read this independently. We're going to do a whole lot of reading on the channel on the trajectory that we're headed. So Abraham had, before Isaac was born, the Most High had given Abraham Ishmael by his Egyptian servant, Hagar. And so this is, when you read it, the Most High still told, matter of fact, this is the stuff for the sake of the stream, we got to read it all. So now where do we have to go? We got to go back to Genesis, right? Let's go to Genesis. I've got to put a whole lot of markers now in my book. Genesis chapter, I'm going to say chapter 20. It might be a little earlier. I want to find the chapter. Are you down there listening, LT? Yeah. I want to find the chapter. It might be verse 20, where Abraham petitioned to the Most High, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. So check chapter 20 out, because I know Isaac is born in chapter 21. And before that, the Lord said, at this time next year, I will visit you again, and it will be the time of life, and Sarah will have conceived. We want to go there because why? Because now what are we doing? We're breaking down what it means when it says unto Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He said seed as one, but not as unto many. So I want us to read that. It's important because why? Because this thing is streaming, and you already got people out in YouTube land and everywhere else in the world, and even in Israel, that's already arguing because that's in their minds, because they've been brought up thinking that Israel was the Hyksos dynasty and we ruled Egypt for all these years. And you're going to find out at the end of all of this reading, we were only afflicted no more than 144 years in ancient Egypt. And we're not using no other books but the Bible. And you're going to find it out. So that's why I said we have to be meticulous now, because we can't leave no gaps or holes for argument. Okay, let's go. Genesis chapter 17, everybody. And Genesis chapter 17. Now listen, we're going to read verses 15 all the way down to verse 19, all right? No. We're going to read Genesis chapter 15 all the way down to 22. And this is, what does this do? This explains, then we're gonna go to Genesis chapter 25 and like read the first 8 verses. Why are we gonna do that? We gotta explain and understand why it saith not, in Galatians it said to seed as one, not as in many. We gotta read, why would it say that? We gotta read so the people can know Abraham had 8 sons. And out of all of those 8 sons, the Most High only extended his covenant with Abraham to one of them. And then he did, and he made that promise at a moment. And that moment is very important. All right. So whoever's reading, start off at verse 15 and let's finish it up at verse 22. Go ahead. Go ahead, Dawiyah, you right there.
17.
Chapter 17.
All right.
If you don't mind reading, because you can come back over this, not like you got a whole lot of time because y'all be working your tails off, but you still at least gonna have this to be able, this stream to be able to go back and take your notes.
Come.
Go ahead.
Genesis 17, verse 15.
From
And the
chapter
Most High-
7. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
And the Most High said unto Abraham, as for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. And I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. Yeah, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations.
Now what's taking place now, we're reading the promises that Galatians made mention of. Remember, we just came from Galatians. And what did it say? In verse 16, it says, now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. These are the promises being made right now in Genesis. And that one seed is being identified in this very chapter 17. Go ahead.
It says, a child shall be born unto him that's 100. Says, and then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed and said in his heart, shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old?
Yeah, Abraham like, well, I'm 100 years old. He found that funny. The notion that he would give birth, and his wife was 10 years younger, so she was 90. Go ahead.
And shall Sarah, that is 90 years old, bear? And Abraham said unto the Most High, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee.
He's petitioning the Heavenly Father to extend those promises from himself to Ishmael. I already have a son. This is what he's saying. Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. Go ahead.
And the Most High said, Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him.
So there you go. Hold on. See that? So he's saying what? So now we know right now Abraham has one son, but at the birth of Isaac, he would have had 2. And this is why it says in Galatians, now the promises were made to Abraham and his seed. It said not as to many seeds as in many, but as in one. And it says as in seed, which is Christ. That's talking about the line through whom Christ would eventually come down. So that turned out to be Isaac, we know. Read on down.
And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year.
This set time in the next year, Sarah gonna have a baby. You're gonna name him Isaac. And that's who I'm okay, listen, because Ishmael is your seed, I'm gonna make a great nation out of him. But Isaac is gonna be the man that I'm gonna work with. Go ahead, read that, verse 22.
And he left off talking with him, and the Most High went up from Abraham.
Now, one more. Let's go to chapter 25 of Genesis. Genesis chapter 25, and start off at verse 1.
Genesis chapter 25 and verse 1 reads, then again Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. And she bare him Zimran, a Jokshan, a Madan, a Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua.
Those are 6 other sons, right? So Abraham got Ishmael, Isaac, and then these other 6. Go ahead.
And Jokshan begat Sheba.
Okay, hold on. Verse 3 and 4 are talking about Abraham's grandsons, the sons of his sons with Keturah. So let's skip that and jump down to verse 5.
Verse 5. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac.
Go ahead.
But unto the sons of the concubines, which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived eastward unto the east country. And these are the days of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived 100 score.
No, read it right. Read it with the proper punctuation.
God. And these are the days of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived 103 score and 15 years.
So that a score is 60. Score is 20. 3 score would be 60, and another what? Another 15 years would be 75. So Abraham lived at the up until the age of 175 years old, and he died having 8 sons. Now, let's go back to Galatians chapter 3. And you're going to read that again. I think Dawiyah was reading one in Galatians, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Galatians chapter 3, verse 17, right?
No. We want to reiterate verse 16. We went and did all that reading so we could come back and break it down clearly.
Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He saith not, and to seeds as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Christ.
Stop. So he's telling you what? The Most High made a promise with Abraham to one of his seed. But we just read in Genesis chapter 17, which one? It turns out that it was Isaac. He said, yeah, I know you want me to deal Ishmael, and I'm going to bless Ishmael. He's going to have 12 sons. But Isaac will I establish my covenant with. And then in order to see to what degree Abraham understood that at his death, before he died, he had 8 sons altogether, and he gave everything he had to what? To only Isaac. And it says all the others are his sons that he had with his concubines. It's showing you that Hagar and Keturah were what? They were considered concubines. But to the sons that he had with his concubines, it says he only gave them gifts and sent them to the east. In other words, he sent them to dwell in the region that would become Arabia. That was the east of where Abraham was, the land of Canaan. So this is letting us know what we read that to see what it's talking about. Now the question is, when did this happen? And what was significant about the time that it happened? Go ahead, Dawiyah, verse 16.
Verse 16, Galatians 3 and 16.
No, 17 now.
17. And this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before the Most High in Christ, the law, which is 430 years after, cannot disannul, that it should make the promise of none effect.
Now, and this is why it goes undetected. But this verse 17 is telling us the moment at which the Most High made the covenant with Abraham. It says, and this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before the Most High in Christ, that means the Most High confirmed the covenant with Abraham.
God.
And it says before Christ, meaning Christ was present. He was present in the spiritual realm. At the moment that the Most High made a covenant and confirmed it with Abraham, it says 430 years later, the law was given. Well, the question is, when was the law given to us? The law was given when we came out of Egypt. The law wasn't given to us when we were in Egypt, was it?
No.
The Most High took us out into the wilderness and then began the process of giving us a law. That happened what? 430 years after he made his covenant. I don't know if you guys are seeing this. So what do we find out? What is it that, who remembers what we were looking for? We knew that according to Exodus chapter 12, verses 40 and 41, that Israel came out of Egypt after 430 years. But what we didn't know is when did that 430-year period begin? And it's telling you here that that 430-year period began in the moment that the Most High made a covenant with Abraham. That's what it's telling you. So let's go and read. Guess what we're going to be having to do? We got to go back to Genesis chapter 15 and start off at Genesis chapter 15 and start off at verse 13 again. And this time we're going to read all the way down to 18. And you're going to be like, oh.
Come. Genesis.
Genesis 15 and 13. And he said unto Abram, know the surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with a great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age.
So this is the Most High talking to Abraham about the future of his posterity. Continue.
God. But in the fourth generation, they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full.
Go ahead.
And it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between these pieces.
That passed between those pieces. Let me say this. This is just talking about earlier in the chapter, the Most High appeared to Moses and to Abraham, and Abraham made a sacrifice. Told Abraham to sacrifice. And so in the process, Abraham had taken the animals he was supposed to sacrifice, and he cut the pieces up and put them on the altar. Then the Most High began to talk with Abraham. Then once he finished talking to Abraham, what happened? He went and the Most High began to consume the sacrifice. Continue to read.
In the same day, the Most High made a covenant.
Listen, I need you guys to read the words as they appear. It says in that same day, not in the same day. Go ahead.
It says in my script, it says in the same.
Okay, what does yours say, Dawiyat?
Verse 13, it says it,
18.
verse 18. It says, in the same day.
Okay, then mine's is an old English, what you call it. So mine's is the one that's off. In the same day, that means in the same moment that he's telling Abraham about these prophecies. Continue, Kwam, go ahead.
God, in the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates.
Now stop. So hold on. What's so important about this? What is important about this is the moment that Paul is recognizing in Galatians chapter 3 and verse 17 that the period that was 430 years, the period of 430 years was marked by us leaving Egypt, but this was the moment that that period began.
Okay.
Now, you guys stay here. I'm going to go back and read Galatians so that we can stay on top of it. In Galatians, what does it say? It says, and this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before the Most High in Christ, hold on, what covenant? It just says here in verse 18, in that same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham. So something happened after this covenant. I'm going to go back to Galatians and read it. And this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before the Most High Christ, what we just read in Genesis, it says the law, which was 430 years after. So 430 years after this moment that the Most High what? Made a covenant with Abraham, he gave us the law. So what does that let y'all know? That the 430 years of Exodus chapter 12, verse 40 and 41 began right here. And then 400 began right here, began right here in Genesis chapter 15. between verses 13 and 18. And what was the covenant? The covenant was that the Most High would give us, the seed of Abraham, the land that extends from the great river Egypt, the river Egypt, all the way to the great river Euphrates. In other words, the river in Egypt is called the Nile. That's like the eastern third of the land of Egypt, going all the way up toward and into the western third of the land of Iraq today. And everything down in between was given to us. And so that promise was made 430 years before the law came. But why does it say 430 years? Because it's talking about this is the period in which the 430 year began. Can anybody see that? Is that clear to y'all or not?
Yeah.
If it's not clear, say it ain't, so we can go back over it slower.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you taught the first time, and it was clear as hell, but it's been like 2 years for me.
But and that's why I say it's one of those things that people, it always kind of dissipates, you know? Because we'll read. Now, why is this important? Because people will take Exodus chapter 12 and verse 40 and 41, where it says we came out in 430 years, and they'll take Genesis chapter 15 and say it said 400 years, but that was just an approximation. No, the Most High is dealing with exactness.
Exactly.
People don't get that. Why do you think in 2019, just at the end of the year, the shit hit the fan in the United States? Y'all don't find that, you think that's a coincidence?
No, it's an exact number.
It's an exact number because the Most High already told us what? He told Abraham that his seed would what? Would be afflicted for 400 years. It says, and afterward will I judge that nation. We're in the period of judgment now. But concerning Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25, the 350 years is a process that was taking place within the 400 year period. So you're gonna find out, like I said, I'm bringing it out to you so that when you read it, you'll be able to recognize it. But we're gonna find out that the Most High had prophesied about this great kingdom in Daniel. Yes.
Because I remember last time we were dealing with Egypt proper versus Egypt on the aspect of geography. Like we look at the geography, the map is Egypt, but Egypt in that time period was a lot bigger in territory.
And that's that's what we're going to get to. Okay. The issue, and see, Yet's not with us tonight, so we can't put the map up. But when it says Egypt, Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, where do you think he's standing? He's standing in the land of Canaan. That's why the Lord says this land. Let's go back and read that. Read verse 18 again. Genesis 15 and 18.
Genesis 15 and 18. In the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land.
Now, why did he say this land? Because Abraham was standing in the land of Canaan. And the Most High have him standing almost what could be considered about the center of the territory. Because if you go further down south, you get to one of the borders that's mentioned, which is what? Which is the Nile River. It says the river in Egypt. And then if you go up northeast, right, northeastward, then you get to the other extreme. Where Abraham was standing was somewhere near what could be considered the center of that territory. Now, this is what he's telling us, but it was at this moment that 430 years after this moment that Abraham received this promise, the law came. So you don't see what coincides with that the Israelites had spent 430 years in Egypt. It's because we were in Egypt right now. Abraham was in Egypt. The land of Canaan was the northernmost territory of the kingdom of Egypt during the life of Abraham. Now, by the time Joseph would be born and rule Egypt, Egypt would become an empire whose territory would extend somewhat into West Mesopotamia, and it would go all the way up into the land of the Hittites, which is Turkey, and over in the land of Troy, which is the northwestern region of Turkey today. And so the Egyptians were receiving tribute from everybody. They were receiving tribute from all of those, the regions of the Hittites. They were receiving tribute from all the other kingdoms. That's why they showed you that scene in the old 10 Commandments, where Moses goes back to prophesy against the Pharaoh, and he happens to stumble upon what? A ceremony in session where all of the nations are bringing their tribute. And among them was, one of them was Troy. All of that is real. Now, I say that to show you, and the reason I'm staying here is because I've taught people this, I show them this, and it be slow. They don't get the correlation between what? Exodus chapter 12 and verse 40 and 41. It says the Israelites left after 430 years. And then in Galatians, it tells you that the 430 years began with the covenant. And that's why he said, let's read it one more time. Let's go to Galatians, and I want you to go slowly down here and read verse 17 one more time.
Galatians chapter 3, verse 17. And this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of the Most High in Christ, the law.
Stop. Now, right there, we just read that in the Old Testament. A covenant that was made and confirmed with Abraham. Where was it made at? Name the verse, Dawiyad, what we read.
We just read earlier, we read it was Genesis 15, 17, right?
Okay, Genesis chapter 15, the specific verse is verse 18, but you can say from verses 13 to 18. But now, so he's saying that was the moment that the covenant was made. Go back to Galatians. What happened afterward?
Because the confirmed before the Most High in Christ, the law, which was 430 years after.
So hold on. What else is significant about 430 years? What did we just read in Exodus about 430 years? We read in Exodus, hold up, Quam. What did we read, or Quam? What did we read in Exodus that took place? Without going there, I want y'all to use your minds. Without going there, what did we read took place in Exodus chapter 12 and verse 40 and 41?
Children.
Say that again.
Was there children born?
No, listen. What we just read in Exodus chapter 12 and verse 40 was that after 430 years, Israel came out of Egypt on the self-same day. So all this is saying is that now we know today the law came once we left Israel, right? But I'm sorry, once Israel left Egypt, what did the Most High do? He gave us the law by way of Moses. But Galatians is telling us 430 years before that we got the law, a covenant was already made. So all that's letting us know is that the period of 430 years that ended with us coming out of slavery, it began in the moment that the Most High made the covenant with Abraham. Now, why am I stressing this? Because we're going to take that knowledge of the 430 years and we're going to break down, we're going to find out how long did we suffer. Because Genesis chapter 15 and 13 and 14 said we would be afflicted for 400 years.
God, I got you.
You understand? I'm trying to, that's what I said, this is where, and we're supposed to know, it's just through this breakdown alone that I know that Hyksos BS is not true. The Hyksos BS, and not only that, but also the fact that we suffered in Egypt for 400 years. I was watching a movie a couple of days ago. They got the Most High playing a white boy playing the Most High. There's a movie with the nigga that played Batman. What's his name? Christian Bale.
Yeah, Christian Bale.
He's supposed to be Moses. John Turturro, the dude that is on the Transformers, right? He's a nutcase on Transformers. He's supposed to be the Pharaoh, and the Most High is a little bitty 12-year-old white boy. That's about abomination. But all throughout that movie, they keep making references. We've been here for 400 years. we've suffered for no, you ain't suffered for no damn, you ain't suffered at all. But the people who were there did not suffer for no 400 years in ancient Egypt, and that's where we're gonna start. I just, whether it's clear or not to you guys, I want to make sure I put it out there in YouTube land that that's how you determine it. That you find out, okay, 430 years we were there. Well, how was that for? Well, what are the two extremes? What are the two events that mark the 430-year period? We know that the 430-year period was ended by us coming out of Egypt. But what everyone has overlooked was, when did the 430-year period begin? And so Galatians lets us know that the 430 years began in the moment that the Most High made and confirmed his covenant with Abraham. And that's found in Genesis chapter 15. So the period from Genesis chapter 15, we'll say, Genesis chapter 15 verses, got this air, I drank a bunch of water. Genesis chapter 15 verses 13 to 18, that's one marker. That's the beginning. Then all that history from there to Exodus chapter 12 and verse 41, only 430 years are covered. I'm going to say it again, and then we're going to finally move forward. Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 through 18, marks the beginning of the period that would end in Exodus chapter 12, verses 40 and 41. And the time period would be 430 years. Now, what do we got to do? We got to find out how those years were spent. Were those 400 years spent suffering? And that's what we're going to start with now. So where do we go from there? We go backward. No, we're there. We stay where we are. Well, I said we go backward. Let's do this. Let's go backward. Let's go to Genesis chapter 12. Now, this is where all the reading starts. So y'all can like be bouncing every 10 verses, right? Y'all can switch readers between the two of you. Y'all can switch between Kwam and Dawiyad every 10 verses, starting off at Genesis chapter. We're going to read Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 20. So Dawiyad, you got verses 1 through 10, and Kwam got verses 11 through 20. All right.
Now the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of my country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father.
Hold on, you got to read it right. Did the Lord tell Abraham to get out of my country or thy country?
Thy kindred. Says out of thy country. It's like it.
Okay.
So now the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee.
Now, where was Abraham at now? Abraham was in the land of Haran. Haran was up in the northernmost part of Syria. All right. And from there, remember, Abraham had come out of Mesopotamia, the land of Ur of the Chaldees. That means he had came out of the southern region of Iraq. That would be somewhere slightly north, so many clicks north of the Persian Gulf. That's where Ur was. So Abraham left in the end of chapter 11. Abraham is with his father Terah. He's with his brother Nahor, and his brother Haran had already died. And the land was named after that deceased brother, the land of Haran. So the Most High says, okay, it's time for you to leave because your father's an idolater and I'm getting ready to make a covenant with you. Go ahead.
Verse 2, and I will make thee of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed.
So now this is the beginning of a series of promises. This is what Paul mentioned in Galatians. In verse 16, it says, now unto Abraham were the promises made, and unto his seed. This is what it's referring to. And the promises were the same promises of what? Of a land, but every time the Most High would make an appearance to Abraham and tell him about this land, he would give them each time, he would give Abraham each following time more details of the promise. So right now the promise is vague. He says, I will to a land that I will show thee. So he didn't say what land yet. But and this is the first time the Most High lets us know that he's reaching out to Abraham. And then in the second time, you're going to find out he gives him a little bit more information. Then the third time, a little bit more. And then by the third and fourth time, he's finally given Abraham the full details. And those full details are found in Genesis chapter 15 that we just read. Go ahead, Dalia.
So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran.
So now you see where he left. Lot was the son of Haran. Haran had died. Lot left with Abraham. Nahor stayed with his father Terah. Nahor would later on beget Bethuel, right? In other words, this is the side of the family where the men, the sons of Isaac, the sons of Abraham and Isaac would get their wives. They would go back to Haran and get their wives. This is where Rebekah would come from. And then this is where Rachel and Leah and Zilpah and Bilhah would come from. Go ahead.
And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. And into the land of Canaan they came.
So here now remember, you have to write these little notes down, because this is how you're going to know. And guess what? You're going to find out. The time period between Genesis chapter 12 and Genesis chapter 15, only 1 year has passed. But you're not going to be able to calculate that until we read the entire account. So that's why I said I want you to make these notations. So one important thing is that Abraham is what? In verse 4, Abraham is 75 years old. Make that notation. Because you'll read a whole lot of stuff between chapter 13 to 12, 13, 14, and then 15, and you think a whole lot of time has passed. But no, the time that would have passed between chapters 12 and 15 is only 1 year. Continue, Dawiyah.
Verse 6. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Sichem, unto the land of Moreh. And the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, unto thy seed will I give this land.
So the first time the Most High reaches out to Abraham is in verse 1. But now once Abraham gets to the land of Canaan, the Most High comes and appears before him and said, now this is the land I'm going to give you. See, in other words, he's feeding off of or building off of a promise already made. Chapter 12, verses 1 all the way to verse 3. Those are the promises. But now you're going to see the color and the detail coming into the promise. This is the land. In verse 1, he said, get thee down, get out, and go to a land. He didn't say which land. Abraham started traveling. And when he finally got there, he said, okay, this is the land. Go ahead, Dawiyah.
Unto thy seed will I give this land.
Now, let me reiterate. What is it that we're doing right now? It's easy to get lost in this trajectory. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25 made a statement about a period of time that we would be in the hand of this specific kingdom. So we went to Genesis to qualify that the Most High, the period of time that the Most High is working with initially is 400 years. But because people think the 400 years already took place in Egypt, we have to what? We have to prove that wrong. Now, first of all, we find out that what? That it wasn't 400 years in ancient Egypt, it was 430. The prophecy said that we would be afflicted 400 years, not present, not in the land of, but being there and being afflicted. All right. So what are we doing? we're finding out that then if this was if the 400-year period of affliction was talking about Egypt, the question number one, then why did it say 430 years? Now we're going to go and find out. We're in the process right now of quantifying what took place. In other words, out of the 430 years, how much of that time was spent being afflicted by Israel? That's what we're answering right now with all of this next reading. And then when it's time to go into the next phase, I'll let y'all know. So as for now, we're quantifying what took place in the space of 430 years that began with Abraham receiving a covenant, not the promise, but a covenant. The Most High is making him promises, and then he finally seals it in chapter 15. So what happened between Genesis chapter 15 and Exodus chapter 12 that culminates in 430 years? How was that time passed by Abraham and his descendants? Were they being afflicted? And if so, how long? That's what this reading is about. Go ahead, W. Call your verse up.
Genesis chapter 12, verse 7. And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him.
So this is the first time that the Lord is appearing to him, but it's the second time that the Lord has reached out to him. The first time it just says, and the Lord what? And the Lord had said unto Abraham. So the Most High is making himself known to Abraham. But this time he appears. So we got two encounters of Abraham, one through a verbal message and the other one through being there personally. Continue, Dawiyat.
Verse 8. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west, and Hay on the east. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south. And there was a famine in the land. And Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land.
So Abraham headed south toward Syria, made a stop off in a couple of places in the land of Canaan. He stopped off in a place that would eventually become Bethel, and he stopped off in a place that would become Shechem. And he moved on down. Now there's a famine, so he's continuing southward into the land of Egypt. And what people don't understand even now is that what did the Most High have? The Most High had Abraham walking the trajectory and the boundaries of the land that he would later receive. Because remember, he came out of the land of Ur, which is on the banks of the Euphrates River. He came out of that land with his father. Now he's going down into the land of Egypt, having passed through Canaan. He's walking through the trajectory of the land that the Lord would later announce the borders of. As what? As an inheritance, as a promise of inheritance to his sons. Okay, it's on you, Kwam, verse 11.
God. And it came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarai his wife, behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. And it came to pass that when Abraham was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was very fair. The princes also of Pharaoh saw her, and commended her before Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house.
So when it says commended, meaning they was calling Pharaoh's attention, man, this fine ass woman that came in town, man. Pharaoh's like, well, go bring her here, man. Go get her for me. Go ahead.
And he entreated Abraham well for her sake.
So he treated Abraham well because he thought that that was Abraham's sister. But had he thought, Abraham suspected that if they knew that you're my wife, then they'll kill me and take you. But if I'm your brother, then they don't see me as a threat, and they'll just take you into their house, and I'll be spared for your sake. Go ahead.
and he had sheep and oxen and he asses and men servants and maid servants and she asses and camels. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abraham's wife.
So the Most High was tearing everything that belonged to Pharaoh up because he had the Most High's friend. He took the Most High's friend's wife. Go ahead.
Question.
Huh?
Got a question, brother.
Oh yeah, go ahead, brother. I mean, I gotta keep getting used to the unknown student. Go ahead.
A question that was posed to me recently about this particular issue.
Uh-huh.
And this is the case where Abram basically, pulled a fast one. He pulled a deception game, some might say.
No, let me say this. He lied. Go ahead, brother. Keep on going.
And also the same.
Now let me say this. But he didn't lie. Sarah was his sister. They
Right.
both had the same father and a different mother. So I just said he lied to go on and throw it out. Now what you said was more accurately correct. He pulled a deception mode. Go ahead.
And a similar issue came about with King Abimelech.
Right.
Okay, so one of the thoughts that came out of that is perhaps in these cases, maybe their faith might have been waning a little bit, because if I say, yes, this is my wife, I'm done.
Yeah.
So,
But you got a good way of putting it, brother. But it wasn't that their faith was waning. It was that Abraham was scared, and he was scared to death. And he just said that. He said, listen, I will live because of you. He was afraid of dying, huh? And that's not the only time you're going to hear of an Israelite highly favored by the Most High lying their ass off to the enemy. Right? David, when he was on the run from Saul, he went into the priest. And this is what Christ pulls out. When people be asking, not the people, but the Pharisees was asking, well, how come your disciples are pulling corn and eating on the Sabbath? And Christ said, have you not read in your own law where David went into the priest and took the showbread, which was not lawful to eat, but lawful to eat, but of the priest only? Well, when you go and you read that, guess what happens, huh? David went up into that place, and the priest said, oh man, what are you doing? He says, I'm here on a mission from the king. He said, well, where are your men? He says, well, the king told me to come here, and he didn't want no one else to know, so I had my men stay without the city. David was lying his ass off. Saul was trying to kill him. Saul didn't send him on no errand. The errand that Saul wanted to send David on was to meet the Most High. It's true. So these are and these are lessons for us. What lessons do we actually get? We get the lesson that can be found in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 16 and 17, where it says, be not over righteous, neither make thyself over wise. Why shouldest thou destroy thyself? But then he comes back in the verse 17 and says, be not wicked over much, neither be thou foolish. Why shouldest thou die before thy time? And this is the lot that the Most High gives the man to have to experience and maneuver through using wisdom. Huh? So no, you're right, Troy. It wasn't that his faith was waning. He trusted the Most High. His ass didn't trust Pharaoh, but he was afraid. So this was a measure that was what? And that shows you, the Most High tell you, Abraham didn't get the law, but Abraham's faith was based on, Abraham's righteousness was based on the fact that he trusted the Most High. And at this time, at this moment, his trust hadn't even been put to the test yet. Isaac wasn't even born to be put through that, for him to have to go through that test. So what do you find, Doc? You find something in Abraham that we all have in us, man. That fear. And guess who also had that fear? Who demonstrated that fear? The greatest of us all, Christ himself, demonstrated that fear. And people don't know that. But why do you think he was praying to not have to be crucified, to not have to be captured? That's what the prayer in John chapter 17 is about. When he says, I pray that let this cup pass from before me. He prayed that prayer 3 times, but he kept on resolving it and saying what? Nevertheless, Lord, thy will be done. So what happened was he had fear because the Most High wanted him to have what? That human sinful element, that nature. And then Christ had to take the knowledge that he had of his mission and defeat it. So yeah, brother, you make a power. I was wondering if somebody was going to bring it up. So thank you, Troy. But you got those, listen up, you have Abraham with the king of the Pharaoh of Egypt. You have Abraham with Abimelech. And you also have Christ. You have you have David before Saul. You understand that? In these moments where what? Where through fear, Abraham through fear, brother, they went up and they straight up deceived. David specifically lied. Abraham was playing semantics. You know? He was, because it was his sister. So what are you doing? Now you're playing semantics with me. Yeah, Kwam, what's that?
Would be the same instance for Peter in the end when he denied
Peter
Christ.
was the same. Let me show you something, Mark. Now, thank y'all, because when you examine Peter was different. I'm gonna show you that. Peter wasn't even afraid. Now, why is he afraid twice? I'm gonna show you. If Peter was really afraid, then why is it that when they came for Christ, he's the one that pulled out his sword and chopped the nigga's ear off? Peter proved that he was not afraid. The Most High had to put a spirit on Peter so that his will could be done. Because Peter was ready to fight his way out of that garden and get Christ the hell up out of there. You got to go back and you got to read all 4 accounts. You have to read the moment that after the prayer that Christ is captured in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And when you see that, you're going to find out it was Peter who sliced off one of the soldiers of the priest's ear. And then, so he was sure he was ready to die. He was ready to kill and he was ready to die. And that little slice of the ear, you don't lop nobody's ear off on accident. If Peter wasn't giving that nigga a warning he would have lopped the whole third of the nigga head off. You know, oops, you can't do that if you ain't got no skill. Playing around with knives and take a nigga's his eye out and shit, leave his brain hanging out. Peter just sliced his ear off. And Christ said, no, you have to sheathe your sword. So what did Peter show then? Peter was ready to kill and be killed to get Christ up out of there. But now he follows in the distance unto the courtyard where Christ is being judged. And now the spirit of fear is on. That's why I say he wasn't afraid. The Most High, that had to happen. But people don't know what the Most High was doing to Peter. The Most High was humbling Peter because Peter had to live with that moment for the rest of his life. I always used to wonder, I said, what? I always said he had to carry that moment where he got to the point where he cussed people out. And also, the Most High wasn't going to allow Christ to be made a liar. Peter said, no, man, nobody's coming for you. And Christ said, listen, Peter, before the cock crowed, you would have denied me 3 times. So because Christ said it, it had to happen. So Peter, like I said, Peter demonstrated he wasn't afraid. But because of what was prophesied, that had to happen. And Peter had to have a spirit that facilitate that the Lord's will be done. You understand? And that's why Christ told there was one time when Peter kept insinuating that they would have to come for him. And Christ told him, get behind me, Satan. For thou savorest not the things that are of God. What was he saying? Peter was making it hard for Christ. Christ was trying to lock in. Remember, look what happened in the garden. He was praying that he didn't have to go through it. And the last thing he needed was another soul feeding that doubt. Another soul feeding his desire to want to live and not die. Because that's what Peter was doing with his words. And he said, stop it, Satan. Get behind me, man. Because you're making it hard for me. This ain't what the Most High want. That's what he was saying in layman's terms. For thou savorest not the things that are of the Lord. meaning you don't have a desire for what the Lord want me to have to go through. So imagine you got to go through something, Kwam, and you got one brother telling you, man, you could do this, brother, firing your ass up. But then you got another brother feeding a weakness in you that's gonna make you shout. That's the very dynamic that your school is being built back out of. Yes, San Antonio, Texas is being built back out of a dynamic to where you had elements, one brother feeding into and making everybody fight and pull out and tap into their strength. Then you had another element, the teachers. That's who they are. That's who they were. That were feeding all the weakness. That were feeding the mediocre quality of work. But wanting great expectations, personally speaking. So imagine, look how that dynamic caused a 2- and 3-way rift in your school. You had Mashaba doing one thing, Barnabas doing another thing, both elements operating out the weakness. Then you got Hawar like hell fighting to get things going, and you know, because look what's happening now. The building is coming back. You thought Kyle Cobb gonna mince words? Hold back names and give initials only? No, the scripture said what? You're supposed to mark them that walk contrary to the doctrine. Rebuke them sharply that they may be sound in the faith. Rebuke them sharply that others may fear. Now imagine your mission was to come and die for a bunch of people that don't deserve it. That's hard enough already. And it tells you that in the book of Romans. Hardly would somebody die for a just man. You know? So you've been sent to die for a bunch of rebellious animals. And you got somebody now that love the hell out you, but his love at this moment is nothing more than what? A strong emotional attachment that is inclined to feed your weakness. So every time you're mentioning about your death, he's saying, no, I'm not going to let that happen. That's not what you need to hear. You need the strength. And so that's why Peter was told, get behind me, Satan. So here he is now, what? In this patio, Christ is on the inside being judged, and people are starting to recognize, hey, he was with them, man. Yeah, because his speech, you got the same dialect, you got the same accent as him. And that's when they say Peter started cursing them. Peter went Negro on them, huh? He said, Peter went not just Negro, he went East Side Negro on them. But what happened? Now imagine having to live, imagine being the most sincere person and having to live with that memory. That right there fueled Peter's passion for the rest of his ministry. Just like Paul, having once condemned the followers of Christ, the regret and the contriteness for what Paul did to the beliefs of Christ once he was woken up, that's what fueled him. That's why he mentions it a couple of times in his writings, where he says, "When Christ died for the sinners of whom I am the worst." And he says, because I persecuted the saints. So yeah, Kwam, you're right. That did happen. But that's why I made a mention when I said he wasn't afraid, because he demonstrated. Now, Abraham had what? Now, I'm gonna say this. Truth be told, Abraham wasn't afraid either. Because how do you know he wasn't afraid? Because when he came back and settled in the land of Canaan, and he had to separate from Lot, Lot got taken captive by 4 kings and their armies that had just came from the east and whooped up on the 5 kings that were from Canaan, that region. And when the word got back to Abraham, Abraham took 314 men and defeated the armies of 4 kings. So Abraham wasn't afraid, but see, all of this is happening. Abraham wasn't gonna go down to Egypt and whoop ass, take over Egypt right then and there, you know? But do you hear me, Troy? These are all examples so that the Most High could see that we are our Father's children, man. And they were just like us. They had the same elements of fear, man. They had the same virtues and they had the same shortcomings. And it's through that recognition of that knowledge that we are fed and know that we can make this fight. And they're pulling for us now. Our fathers on the other side are pulling for us. The scriptures say that the angels and men looking to know the things that we go through here on earth. Huh? They're pulling for us. Why did the scripture say that the angels rejoice when one sinner returned to the Most High? That's proof that they're watching us and pulling for us. And Christ is the head of them all. He's the one that's got the specific ear of the Most High. Lord, give him more time. I died for them. And I went, and I know how that fleshly tug is strong, Lord. It's strong, Father, and they don't have what I have. Go ahead and just give them some more time. And that's why when the Most High dropped the hammer, that shit be dropping hard. Because we have an advocate that goes and testifies on our behalf. Anyway, thank you, Troy. Any more you want to bring out, man?
Throw out but it can wait.
No, go ahead. Come on, we there.
No, it can wait. It's a little off topic.
Okay, but don't forget it. Make a note of it, okay?
Come.
And what you do, see, I don't ever know you there, but we could be chopping it up before we go live. Right, W. Yacht?
Huh?
But I don't know he's there, so he got to say, all right, Carl Cobb, I got a question before we go live, all right? All right, Troy?
Come.
I mean, yeah, you know, was he here at the beginning when I was rapping you?
He wasn't here. He was here shortly after.
Okay. No, because that's always good to do. But I mean, I never know the brother there, you know. I just every now and then a voice shocks me from the left side of my screen. Okay, what verse was we at? Kwam, you were reading.
18.
Go ahead, brother.
Genesis 12 and 18. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why saidst thou, she is my sister? So I might have taken her to me to wife. Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her, and go thy way. And the Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had.
Now let me ask y'all this: how is it that a man just strolling into the land of Egypt, the kingdom of Egypt, strolling into Egypt proper, because Abraham was already in Egypt while he was up in the land of Canaan? Why do you think the Most High referred to Goshen as the land of Goshen? It all was Egypt. But within Egypt, you had the land of Goshen, you had the land of Canaan, and then you had all the land of Naph. This is where Joseph ended up becoming the priest at. So how is it that Abraham ended up catching the attention, aside from his wife, to the king of Pharaoh, or the king of Egypt? When you read the Josephus, Abraham was up in Egypt teaching all of them cats the sciences. Did y'all know that? Abraham was teaching them math and all type of sciences. That's in Josephus. So yeah, he departed, but he left them with a whole lot of knowledge that the Greeks would later on come and benefit from. Anyway, okay. So now what are we finding out? All we're doing now is reading the trajectory of the Abraham. Now, how old is Abraham? He's still 75. Do you know how long it takes to walk right now down from the land of Israel all the way into Egypt now? Just crossing Sinai, not the Sinai, but going down into past south of Gaza. Brother, they do it every other day within depending on who you got with you, they do it within between 36 and 72 hours, depending on what your travel time is on foot, on camel. People, so they read this and they think this took years and months. It took literally days to get back to this very day, to get back from it might take a little bit more time now because of the Suez Canal that's there. And like the Panama Canal, you got to go through bureaucratic things, to get through. You can't just cross over from Panama into Colombia and go through all the canal and stuff. It's like that now. And so at worst case scenario on foot, you would be taking 3 or 4 or 5 days to get there, man. But when you read in the scriptures, you're thinking, man, Abraham was traveling his ass off. He was, but it wasn't taking no more than a day and a half to 2 days, depending on the amount of people that he had. So like I said, between Genesis chapter 12 and chapter 15, only 1 year has elapsed. Okay, where we at now? Now we're gonna read all of 13. This is what we got to do it. And this is what people, the quote, the entertaining side of class, right? The entertaining side of going through the scriptures. We ain't about entertainment, we're about knowing. And this is what has to go into breaking down that one verse 25 in Daniel. You got to prove, you got to make the statement. What is this talking about? Then you got to know what people are going to think. How do you know that that's talking about 350? Why is that random number? It ain't no random number. It's a number, it's a small period out of a greater number that's already been prophesied. The prophesied number is 400 years. But people think that that already happened. So we're showing that did not happen. That's what we're showing. Most brothers in Israel can't even tell you when the 430 year, and it's right here in the book. When did the 430 year period begin? They're not going to say, oh, that's in Genesis chapter 15. Well, how do you know that, brother? Because it tells you so in Galatians chapter 3, verse 16 and 17. They ain't going to say that. They're going to go by what the elders and from everybody been regurgitating to them about the Hyksos, and they're going to get it wrong. So, all right, let's go. Let's keep on bouncing. We got what, 18 verses in chapter 13? So I want you to read 9 and 9. Go ahead, Dalia. You take the first 9.
Genesis 13, verse 9. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself.
No. Chapter 13, verses 1 through 18, but you're going to read verses 1 through 9.
Okay, 1 through, okay, no problem. Genesis 13, verse 1.
Right.
And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle. And
Now, why are we reading this? Because Abraham in all of chapter 12, Abraham is on a trajectory from where he starts off in the land of Haran, which is in Syria. He comes down into Canaan, and he keeps and continues, he goes down into Egypt. So now on his way back, this is the moment when Abraham starts actually living, being still, dwelling in the land of Canaan. Go ahead.
And Abram was very rich in cattle, and silver, and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel.
So from the south, meaning coming back up from Egypt, back up to Bethel, where he had, remember we read in chapter 12, he had stopped off in Bethel on his way down. So he's coming up from the south to go right back to where he made that altar. You know, Bethel is a term, is Bayat Allah, which means house of the Lord, house of God. Go ahead, house of the power. Continue.
Unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai.
Right.
Unto the place of the altar, which he had made there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelt there then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren.
Right.
Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left.
Okay, go ahead, Kwam. So this is Abraham is what? He's giving Lot, his nephew. This is how humble Abraham was. He's giving Lot the what? The right to choose. So Lot is like, yeah, man, I like this land over here. Go ahead, Kwam, read. Verse 10.
And Lot lifted up his eyes, and behold, all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot in the city of the plains, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. And the Lord said unto Abraham, after that Lot was separated from him.
Now hold on. Look at this. In Genesis chapter 12 and verse 1, the Most High gives Abraham his first encounter by speaking and telling him, you got to go, leave your father's house. But then in that very same chapter, in verse 7 of chapter 12, the Most High comes to Abraham and gives him the detail, not the detail, but more information concerning this land that you're standing in. Now here we are in chapter 13 and verse 14, a third occasion, the Lord what? Is speaking to Abraham again, and he's going to give him a little bit more detail, so that by the time we get to chapter 15, that's the fourth time that the Lord appears to Abraham and then gives him the whole detail of what to expect concerning the promise, this land, concerning the covenant, concerning what your seed, your descendants are going to go through. So this is what the Most High was doing. He just was introducing little by little, but all of these are elements of what Paul said in Galatians chapter 3, when he said, now we know the promises were made to Abraham and to his seed. That's why he said the promises, because it was just a series of encounters where the Most High kept promising and revealing a little bit more concerning his plan for Abraham. So go ahead, go ahead, pick up at verse 14 again.
Genesis 13 and 14. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward.
So Abraham stayed in the land of Canaan in Bethel. Lot departed toward the east to head toward the river, the plains of Jordan. And so the Lord said, now look at where you're standing. I want you to look east, not all four directions. In other words, he still ain't being specific, but he's amplifying now the information. Go ahead.
For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. Then Abraham removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord.
All right. Now, let's do a summary, because we're not going to read all the way through 14 and all of that. We got that. Okay, because 14 is dealing with the battles of the kings, the 4 kings versus the 5 kings. And then Abraham having to go, and you good?
Yeah, but
Okay,
it's about the battery.
The battery what?
Yeah, it's all good. We got we plug the battery in.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna use the restroom real quick, okay? I'll be right back.
So the only way to get the Zoom teaching is to have Zoom.
Yeah. Why? Chinese guy?
Something like that. It's not so much that it's known, it's the practices that they engage in. The whole super spy thing. I just feel like, don't put yourself out there if you don't have to.
and you're trying to use scripture, right?
Huh?
Okay. You could get that from Doom. I would watch it. That's the only one I didn't have. I had my phone.
Well, he recapped. He recapped it. It was hard. It was hard as mother.
Yeah.
It was so fucking
What was trying to give me the Zoom link and everything, and I didn't have my phone either. Then I got this one, and I was like, by the time I got on my Gmail, my everything situated was.
hard. Okay. You working tomorrow?
Me?
Yeah. Working man tomorrow.
They have me working for the rest of until every day until Christmas.
Oh wow.
Okay. Now, let's say this. Don't forget, we read in Genesis chapter 25, I'm sorry, Genesis chapter 12 and verse 5, verse 4, 1 through 5, Abraham was 75 years old. He's still 75 years old. But in order for us to get some bearing now, this is what we're going to do. We're going to accelerate. We're going to move forward to go to chapter 21. Now, why are we going to go to chapter 21? We're going to go to chapter 21 because Isaac is getting ready to be born now. We're going to read verses 21, verses 1 through 5. We don't have to do it. What are we doing now? All we're doing now is marking the time. We're quantifying what took place during these years. And so it's going to help us to be able to determine the years of suffering experienced. So go to Genesis chapter 21, and you're going to read, Dawiyad, verses 1 through 5, all right?
God. Genesis chapter 21, verse 1. And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken.
Now we read that in what? I'm going to prove it. We read that in chapter 17, right? The Lord said, I'm going to come this time next year in chapter 17. And it says, Abraham fell down laughing. Shall he that is 90 years old? At this time, he's 90 years old now. So now Abraham is what? Like 91. It'll tell you, Abraham is actually 100 years old now. We're going to read it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which the Most High had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as the Most High had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old, and when his son Isaac was born unto him.
No, read verse 5 again.
And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him.
So Abraham has been living in the land of Canaan for 25 years. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to go from here to, once again, Genesis chapter 25, and we're going to read verses 1 through 8 again. Why? Because Abraham dies. And we're going to find out how long, out of 430 years, how much time has expired with the Hebrew presence in the land of Egypt, in the region of Canaan, or we can say in the land of Canaan, within the kingdom of Egypt.
God. Genesis 25, verse 1. Then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimran, and Jokshan, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua, and Jokshan begat Sheba, and Dedan. And the sons of Dedan were Asurim, and Letushan, and Lemim.
So these are Abraham's sons, grandsons, and great-grandsons. But these aren't the seed that were counted. Go ahead.
And the sons of Midian, Ephah, and Epher, and Hanok, and Abidah, and Eldah. All these were the children of Keturah. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. But unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts, and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived, eastward unto the east country. And these are the days of the years of Abraham's life which he lived, 160 years. Then Abraham took up the ghost. Then Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people.
Read one more verse, verse 9, just so we can get the burial.
And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar, the Hittite, which is before Mamre.
So now, from Genesis chapter 20, from Genesis chapter 12, verse 5, Abraham is 75 years old. Chapter 25, verse 7, Abraham dies at 175. He's 75 years old when the Lord calls him. He goes down to the land of Canaan. He dies at what? At 100 years old. So how long had Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan in the kingdom of Egypt? 100 years. So of those 430 years, 100 is expired now. That means there's only 330 years to go. So right off the bat, we done eliminated this as being the possibility. Egypt, in other words, the prophecy of Genesis chapter 15 that we would be afflicted for 400 years, we're already out of that range now. 100 years is expired. When did it begin? It began when the Most High made the covenant with Abraham, and it finalized when Moses was used to bring us out of Egypt. So of those 430 years, 100 was spent during the life of Abraham. And when you read the book of Hebrews, it lets you know that the children of Israel was in his loins, counted being there. How do you know that? Because when you read the book of Hebrews, it tells you that although Levi would become the priest, it says that Levi, the priest who would receive tithes once they got established, it says they paid tithes to Melchizedek while they were yet in their father Abraham's loins. So the Most High counted us as being in the land, swimming in Abraham's loins.
Right.
You got to know the whole Bible. It's all millions of it just waiting to get out. Come on, let us out. Not all at once, my children. Listen, that's even what Ezra said. Ezra said, how come you couldn't make us all here at once? The Lord said, go and ask the womb of a woman that's going to bear children, 10 children. Can she bear all of them at once? He said, no, that she have to do it each one in their course. So that's how the Most High determined that we would all come from Abraham, each one in our course and in our time. Now, what do we have under our belt? This is important, y'all. You got to write it down. 100 years, this is what I want you to do. I want you to write the number 430. Now, next to the 430, you're going to write the verses that deal with the beginning. You write Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 through 18, through Exodus chapter 12, verses 12 verses 40 and 41. Sorry, Exodus chapter 12, verses 40 and 41. Now, from Genesis chapter 12 all the way to Genesis chapter 25 and verse 9, 100 years have passed, right? Am I wrong? Can you guys confirm that?
That's fine.
Because why? Because we just read it. Abraham was 75 when he got the call. He went to the land of Canaan, and he was 175 when he died. He was 100 years old when Isaac was born, right? So how old is Isaac now? Isaac is 75 years old. And now the clock of Hebrew presence in the land of Canaan, in the kingdom of Egypt, is running in Isaac's life. You understand? Abraham is gone. 330 years lie ahead of us. And we still ain't started suffering yet. Now, where are we going from here? All right. It's important. Well, we'll deal with that later. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 35. I'm asking these questions because if anyone doesn't see it, I need for you to acknowledge it. I'm going to run through it one more time. Genesis chapter 12, Abraham is called to go to the land of Canaan at the age of 75. Long story short, by the time you get to Genesis 25, he's 175 years old, right? And in Genesis chapter 21, verses 1 through 5, Isaac was born when he was 100 years old. So here we are in Genesis chapter 25. He's 175 years old. He has just been gathered to his fathers. Isaac is alive now in the land of Canaan at the age of 75. Is that clear? All right. Okay, we only got a couple of verses to read in chapter 35. Let's go to chapter 35. How many years did Isaac spend in his watch in the land of Canaan to continue this Hebrew presence in the land of Canaan within the kingdom of Egypt? So you're going to read Koam, chapter 35, verses 27 through 29, all right?
God. Genesis 35 and 27. And Jacob came unto Isaac his father, unto Mamre, unto the city of Arba, which is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned.
Hold on. Where we at? Did I say Genesis chapter 35?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Go continue. Continue. Yeah, because he's getting ready to bury his father. Go ahead.
And in the days of Isaac were 180 years. And Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him.
So just like Abraham died and Ishmael and Isaac buried him, but Isaac was the one that the Most High chose, and Ishmael was the one that the Lord rejected in the sense of the promise. Now Isaac has died, and Esau and Jacob has buried him, but Jacob was the one that the Most High chose, and Esau was the one that the Most High set by concerning the promise. Now, how old was Isaac?
180 years.
Thank you very much. So this is what you're going to do. You're going to go 430. You just subtracted what? 100. You put 430 under that figure. You put minus 100. And on the right side of that, you put what? Genesis chapter 25, verses 1 through 8, because that's what lets you know Abraham died after having been 175 years old, which means he had lived 100 years in the land of Canaan in the kingdom of Egypt. And that comes out to 330. Now, under that 330, you minus another what? 180. And what do you get? 330 years minus 180. Isaac then died. Let me say this. Not 180. Let's do the math right. How old was Isaac when Abraham died? Isaac was 75. So you do 180 minus 75, and that means what? Isaac lived an additional 105 years in the land of Canaan. So forgive me, it's going to be 430 years minus 100 years of Abraham's life in the land of Canaan. And then that's 330 years. Then you're going to go minus 105 years, because that's how long after Abraham's death that Isaac lived in the land of Canaan, in the kingdom of Egypt. So 330 minus 105, how much is that?
225, right?
Now, where's the 400 years? This thing is dwindling fast, and we ain't even in slavery yet. That's how I keep trying to show y'all the 400 years. And Genesis ain't talking about Egypt. It's talking about America. It's talking about spiritual Egypt, like it says in Revelations. In Revelation chapter 11, it says, and their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city that is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. So now, right off the bat, let's everybody just take a deep breath and let that soak in, because there's no way you can squeeze 400 years out of this one. Jacob ain't even gone down into Egypt yet. Joseph ain't even been captured and went down into Egypt yet. And we only got 200, you said 225 years, right?
225, right? Yeah.
Wow. Now, this is what we got to do. We're going to go now that Isaac is dead, let's put some little details in that we didn't overlook them, but they weren't pertinent, but it's good to know what's taking place in that period of time. So in the time of Abraham's life, at 175 years old, what happened when Abraham was 160 years old? Isaac was 60 years old and the twins were born. That's Genesis chapter 25, verses 19 to the end. You guys, are you being aware of this? I'm just filling in some historical details. What have happened between the life of Abraham and the life of Isaac at Isaac's death? Abraham was 100 years old when he gave birth to Isaac. When he died, he was 75 years old. So Isaac was 75 years old. But when Isaac was 60, what happened? His wife gave birth to the twins. So that by the time Abraham died, the twins were 15 years old.
Wow.
This is all the stuff that you have to know, just be understanding what's taking place through the scriptures. So we're going from there now to Genesis chapter 46, verses 1 through 7. Kwam, you're going to read that. And then we're going to follow up with Genesis chapter 47, verses 1 through 9. Dawiyat, you're going to read that. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to stop it after that so that we can deal with the time of Joseph next Friday.
Come.
But what are we going to find out now? I said Genesis chapter 46. Genesis chapter 4:6.
I got the 46. What was it?
Okay, you're going to read verses 1 through 7.
1 through 7. Kana, slide.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Genesis 46, verse 1. And Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices unto the Most High of his father Isaac. And the Most High spake unto Israel in the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here am I. And he said, I am the Most High, the power of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation.
So Isaac is getting ready to what? He's getting ready now. Now, we didn't go through all that history because we're going to get to it later. We're going to start on that next Friday. But what are we doing? We're getting ready to find out how many years after the death of Isaac, his father, did Jacob remain in the land of Canaan in the kingdom of Egypt. And you're going to find out it was only 10 years more. And all the time of Israel in the land of Egypt or in the land of Canaan, it's not going to go, it will have only been 215 years. Then we would have of 430 years, we would only go down to the land of Egypt proper and spend only 215 years there. And of those 215 years, 71 of those years will be spent under the protection of Governor Joseph, our brother. And then after he died, there will only be 144 years left to have suffered. And the scriptures tell you we didn't start suffering the day after he died. It says that all of the generation of Joseph's brothers died. And then we continue to multiply and become greater and more than the Egyptians. You'll be amazed to find out if we suffered 100 years. But I always go with 144 because that's how many years were left. Of the 430 years, only 144 years were left to have to suffer after the death of Joseph. But that's what we're going to cover on next Friday. Of we got to read. So go ahead, pick up on the verse that you left off, brother.
God. Genesis 46 and verse 4. And I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will also surely bring thee up again. And Joseph shall put his hand upon thy eyes. And Jacob rose up from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, and their little ones, and their wives, in the wagons which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. And they took their cattle and their goods, which they had gotten in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt. Jacob and all his seed with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all his seed brought he with him into Egypt.
So the question is, when Jacob gets into Egypt, how old is he? Now let's go back and do some more math now. So we got 430 years minus 100. That's the life. Those are the years of Abraham's life that he spent in Canaan. He died at 175, but of those 175, he had only spent 100 in Canaan. So we got 330 years. Isaac is what? Isaac is 180 years old when he died, but having only spent an additional 105 years, right? So Isaac, if Isaac died at the age of 180, and Jacob was born when Isaac was what? When Isaac was 60, according to Genesis 25. When Isaac died at the age of 180, how old would that have made Jacob? Y'all do the math. 120?
180 minus 60.
Yep. Right, y'all?
Yeah, 120.
Okay, so here Jacob is 120 years old when Isaac dies. So from the age of 120 up until the age that he was when he left for Egypt, that's what we're getting ready to find out now. So now you're going to go to Genesis chapter 49. In other words, we're going to find out how old Jacob was when he left for Egypt, and that will tell you how many more years he spent in the land of Canaan after his father Isaac's death. Then we will have, and then he left with all of his seed. Then we will find out what? Then we will know how many of those 430 years, how many of those 430 years were spent in the land of Canaan in the kingdom of Egypt. And then anything outside of that was spent in the land of Canaan, in the land of Goshen in the kingdom of Egypt. So go ahead, Dawiyat, chapter 47 and verse 1. Now what's happening is Joseph is presenting his brothers and his father before Pharaoh. And his father is going to take a particular interest or curiosity in Jacob's age. So go ahead, all the way to verse 9.
Genesis 47, verse 1. Then Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brethren, and their flocks and their herds, and all that they have, are come out of the land of Canaan. And behold, they are in the land of Goshen. And he took some of his brethren, even 5 men, and presented them unto Pharaoh.
So that means out of all of his brothers, he presented 5 of them and his father. Go ahead.
And Pharaoh said unto his brethren, what is your occupation? And they said unto Pharaoh, thy servants are shepherds, both we and our fathers, and also our fathers. They said moreover unto Pharaoh, for to sojourn in the land are we come, For thy servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. Now therefore, we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, Thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee. The land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and brethren to dwell. In the land of Goshen let them dwell. And if thou knowest any men of activity among them, then make them rulers over my cattle.
So here the Pharaoh is saying, man, I'm putting your brothers in charge of my cattle. You got to choose the ones for me. And I'm giving you guys the best part of the land of Egypt, which is in Goshen. Go ahead.
And Joseph brought in Jacob, his father, and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, How old art thou?
The moment of truth. Go ahead.
And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage.
Now, so how old is Jacob? Jacob is 130 years old. He's just now getting to Egypt. So when his father died at the age of 180, Jacob was 120. When he left for Egypt and arrived, he was 130. So that means he spent an additional 10 years in the land of Canaan in the kingdom of Egypt. So go back to the math equation, and you're going to write, it was 225, right? Now you're going to write minus 10. And you're going to put the corresponding verse, Genesis chapter, both of those, so that you can read it. Genesis chapter 46, verses 1 through 7, and Genesis chapter 47, verses 1 through 9, because they both show Jacob leaving the land of Canaan and arriving in the land of Goshen. And he was 130. So that means, how much do you have left now? 225 minus 10, how much is that?
215.
Say that again.
215.
So that means, and now we're in Egypt proper. Now we're in the metropolis, or closer to the metropolis of Egypt. But we were already on the outskirts in the eastern wing of the kingdom of Egypt. And there's only, and listen, and we ain't even started getting our ass whooped yet, have we?
No.
No. So how long did we suffer in Egypt? So far, all we can say is no more than 215 years. Now, of all of those years, the 100 years of Abraham's life, the 100 of the time spent in the land of Canaan in the kingdom of Egypt, and the 105 years of the life of Isaac spent in the land of Canaan in the kingdom of Egypt, that brings it to what? 205. And then of the 10 years of the life of Jacob that remained after his life, after his father Isaac died, that he stayed in the land of Canaan in the kingdom of Egypt, that's what? 100 plus 105 is 205 plus the 10, that's 215. They both, in other words, we spent 215 years in the land of Canaan in the kingdom of Egypt, and our final 215 years in the land of Goshen in the kingdom of Egypt. And next week, we're going to read how the years were spent. But just to give you a spoiler alert, we lived under Joseph's protection for 71 years. So right now, how much, you don't got to write it down until we actually read it so we can attribute the actual verses. But 215 minus 71, how much is that?
144.
Been telling y'all. And then the other brothers had to die off. And they didn't all die in weeks. Oh, Joseph died. Oh my God, there goes Manasseh. Oh my God, Gad is gone. Oh my God, Asher died. You know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, brothers just dropping dead.
No.
You know what I mean? Oh my God, Issachar, not Issachar. You know, that shit. Judah, oh no, I didn't see that one coming. Right. Like this, and that was all the 12 tribes died in 12 days. It sounded like the damn 12 days of Christmas. On the third day of Christmas, Asher passed away. you know. Anyway, so that's what we're gonna find out. How I said, but we go with what? We're gonna read from Genesis 41. We're gonna have to take maybe, I'm gonna say a step back, but we are gonna have to go far enough back to find out how old Joseph was when he was captured at the age of 17, how old he was when the Most High brought him to the throne of Egypt. He was 30 years old. And then how old was he when his family and his brothers and his fathers finally moved to Egypt? He was 39. You understand? And then it tells you how old he was when he died, and that's how old you'll know we were ruled under him, or we were under his protection. You're gonna find out, right? So all of that is for next Friday. All right. And then listen, I don't know. I know y'all be working the man and the pace is high power, but y'all got to be enthused for this, because this is giving us more clarity, because the more we get, the more the pendulum swings toward America being displaced.
Yeah.
And don't think it's a strange thing. So people will say, I'm going until 11 o'clock, y'all. We got 8 more minutes. So people will say, concerning the time and the dividing of the time, one of the arguments is that the 400 years couldn't have been 1619 because Gad and Reuben and Issachar was already being conquered and destroyed by Esau starting in the 1500s, and they're telling the truth. But you have to follow the prophecies. And you got to put all of the things that pertain to this topic together. So when you read Revelations, the Most High specifies that in the land of spiritual Sodom and Egypt, it says the 2 prophets would be there. And the 2 prophets ain't talking about 2 people. It's talking about the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. And the kingdom of Judah was not joined into their brothers again until 1619 in the place that would become the United States. So those are all we're going to cover every angle possible, so y'all can see this thing that went down at the end of last year that culminated in the opening of 2020 being locked down and quarantine and isolation and social distancing and masks and the potential vaccine. Brother, this is judgment. That 400 years was marked last year, and right off the bat, the cascading started. It ain't going back. It ain't going back to, listen, it is the new normal, because it ain't going back to that thing. The Most High is getting ready to come and tear this world up, and the height of the tearing up is going to be done in Babylon the Great, which is the United States. And we're in that trajectory right now. And the Most High is going to start blessing us while at the same time afflicting us, because the scriptures say this is going to be the time of Jacob's trouble. And he's going to remove the ability for us to maneuver in these systems so as to begin to manifest the more miraculous nature, because he'd be doing miracles for us, but he'd be doing it through us, through each other, and the work, and blessing the work of our hands, and blessing the business enterprises and things like that. But the time going to come in tearing this system down, nothing's going to work, so that the Most High can make it evident, just like with our fathers, that he was plaguing Egypt. The first 4 plagues we had to endure with them. And then after the flies, the Most High said, okay, now it's time for me to show that I put a difference between Israel and the house of and the Egyptians. And that's what's going to happen here. We got to start. And that means, when do those outward miracles come? When do those clear, miraculous miracles come? Those clear and miraculous miracles only come in the time of potential annihilation for us. That's the only time that's when the Most High, that's why the scripture said, the Lord delivereth, he saveth in the time of trouble, and not before then. He saveth in what? The time of trouble. And you go back and you read your history, the Most High only did it when the miracle would have its maximum effect. And so we're going to have to be put in those positions for the Most High to begin to manifest himself to the world, that who he's for and who he's against, And in both, he's going to do so more miraculously. And we just have to hold on until those moments come. And then we got to know that when they do come, they're only going to come, like he said they come, in the time of trouble. So with that, we'll say shalom to y'all, brothers and sisters.
Okay.
And see y'all on Friday, next Friday, all right?
Shalom.
Nah, man.
Shalom.